We gather together today as the dear family and friends of Norman Adell. As we mourn his loss, must also celebrate the full, rich life he led. Death has taken our beloved Norman. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For his love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind which brought us joy and happiness and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'anai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. He's achieved success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of little children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, who has left the world better than he found it, whether by an improved poppy, a perfect poem, or a rescued soul, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who has always looked for the best in others and given the best he had, whose life was inspiration, whose memory a benediction. A poem entitled, To My Father. A giant pine, magnificent and old, stood staunch against the sky, and all around shed beauty, grace, and power. Within its fold birds safely reared their young. Beneath was gentle, and the cooling shade gave cheer to passers-by. Its towering arms a landmark stood erect and unafraid, as if to say, fear naught from life's alarms. It fell one day. Where it had dauntless stood was loneliness and void. But men who passed paid tribute said, to know this life was good. It left its mark on me. Its work stands fast. And so it lives, such life no bonds can hold. This giant pine, magnificent and old. Adonai ro'i lo exar, bina desha yar bitseni, amei minachot yanachaleni. Please join me in the familiar words, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed that there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all 3. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So this is a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Norman. We'll each remember Norman in our own way. Ava and Michael and Ruth, You'll remember Norman as your beloved father. Norman was a devoted grandfather to Leah, Alex, and Rachel, an adoring great-grandfather to Kai and June. Throughout his life, Norman was a caring brother to Lillian, Anne, Sylvia, Nate, Pearl, Mike, and Harry, and a loving uncle to his many nieces and nephews. Norman was born here in Cleveland on June 23, 1926, to Reuben and Sarah Adell. He was the youngest and the last surviving of 8 children. Norman was a young boy during the Depression. He told stories of how he would go out to the farms with his older brother to get corn and then sell it on the street. He also sold newspapers to the big houses in Shaker. Norman graduated from John Hay High School in 1944. He started as a wrestler in high school. He was 5'9" and weighed 99 pounds. Norman got appendicitis and was not allowed to play contact sports, so he waited a year and went out for the basketball team. He spent most of the time on the bench until the coach put him in on the last game of his senior year, and Norman saved the game. He made the last basket, and they won. Norman was also the president of AZA. Norman graduated high school at 17 and wanted to follow his 3 brothers into the service, but he needed his parents' permission because he hadn't yet turned 18. His mother didn't speak English. They only spoke Yiddish at home. So he put the forms in front of her and told her to sign, and he was off to the Navy. Norman was in the Pacific Theater. He saw 1 year of battle and was part of the occupation in Japan for a year. Norman ran the newspaper on the ship and made all the menus. He was often the first to hear the outside news. He told the ship when Germany surrendered and received the first pictures when we signed the armistice with Japan. When he came back from the Navy, he studied at Case Western Reserve on a GI Bill, and he finished his business degree in 2.5 years. Norman was fixed up on a blind date with Lois, and they were married 9 months later on January 30th, 1954, by Rabbi Cohen in Rosenthal Ballroom at Park Synagogue. 2 years later, Ava was born, and then 21 months later, Ruth came along. Norman first owned a beverage store for 5 years with his best friend, Maury. Then he started working in produce and with beechnut baby food. Norman then began to work at Collier Publishing, which became part of Macmillan, where he remained as a sales rep for the next 35 years. Norman took authors to shows like the Morning Exchange or nationally Phil Donahue. He was often picked up in a limo, and he flew on Jonathan Livingston Seagull's own plane. Norman worked his way up to manager of the United States. When the girls were young, they remember how he often left on Monday mornings and didn't get home till Friday afternoons. He visited many colleges and universities. Eventually, Norman became the religious manager because he saw it was an underserved market. Norman spent much of his time selling Christian books. He said, "That New Testament was a damn bestseller." Norman was a voracious reader and liked to read everything he sold. Even after he retired, they sent him galley copies of books and asked what he thought. Norman loved golf, sports, and most of all, he loved to travel. Lois did not love to travel, but he got her on a few cruises and to Israel and Hong Kong. When Ava and Ruth were single, they traveled with him. They visited 40 different countries. Ava accompanied her father to Israel, Africa, and China, and Ruth went on 27 cruises with him. Norman loved musical theater and went to the Broadway series at Playhouse Square for many years. He also took the girls to shows at Kane Park when they were young. He enjoyed taking them on nature hikes at North Chagrin Reservation with their 2 dogs, or going out to Chagrin Falls to get ice cream. Ruth came home to live with her parents when she was pregnant with Alex 34 years ago. Norman and Lois completely doted on him. Ruth was very dependent on them at the time. But then when Lois passed away 24 years ago, the tables turned, and Norman became dependent on Ruth. Norman enjoyed going out to California once a year to visit Ava, Michael, and Leah. Norman had a dry sense of humor, and he was very interested in politics up until last week. He even asked what happened in the Alabama special election. He lived his 91 years to the very fullest. And so today may be a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Norman, but we learn much from him, especially how to care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old man planting trees. "Old man," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You will never live to see them blossom." But the man replied, "My ancestors planted trees not for themselves, but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I too do the same for all those who will come after me." Norman planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and with love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we're able to share in Norman's life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it will be a time for pondering, a time for contemplation. Norman will become a greater part of our characters and our very beings as we integrate the memories and the values he taught us into our own selves. But finally, there'll come a time for song. The time will come when we can celebrate Norman, when we recall all that we learned from him and how he touched each of our lives. May he rest in peace. Zecher Sadik Livracha. May the memory of Norman Adell be a blessing. Amen. I'd now like to invite Norman's daughter Ruth to come forward to share some personal words about her father.
I originally said I didn't need a piece of paper because all I was going to say that after my mom died, I made a promise to myself that where Dad was concerned, there would be nothing left unsaid or undone. And I would keep him happy and healthy as long as I could. But I remembered last night, probably about 3 o'clock, that we forgot to tell the rabbi something that I thought was very special, and I wanted to share with you guys. How many of you guys remember how Dad used to take his weekly trips to visit his brothers and sisters? He'd always stop by once a week to see everybody. And he would talk sports with Uncle Harry and Uncle Nate and Uncle Mike. And then with Uncle Nate, he would usually argue politics because they really were on the opposite side of just about everything. He would stop and see Aunt Pearl and Aunt Sil all the time, talking about growing up and anything that they had in common. Once in a while I got to go along. But he was very lucky that his job allowed him to have that free time to go and see. And one by one he had less people to visit, and he was the youngest and the last one. He missed going. He missed always going out when he couldn't really do it. I guess we're all going to miss him. And sorry. Okay, that's all I was just going to say. We're going to miss him. I will, and we will all remember all the times we had as growing up as kids in our big family. Lots of love. Love you all. Thank you.
Thank you for your beautiful words. Let's all pause for a moment of silence as we each remember Norman in our own hearts. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see victory lies not at some high place along the way, but having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage to life everlasting. Amen. If you are able, please rise now for El Malay Rachamim, God full of compassion. El Malay Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Minocha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Otehorim, Kezora Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat, Yerma ben Ruvain Vesara, Shalach La'olamo, Baal Harachamim, Yashirechu Beseter Kenafav La'olamim, Vayitzror Bitzra Chachayim Et Nishmato, Ranaihu Nachalato, Yanuach Bishalom, Al Mishkavo Vinomar. Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Norman Adell, known in our tradition as Yerma ben Ruvain Vesara, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated for a few moments. This completes our service here. We'll proceed from here to Beit Olam Cemetery for burial. Following burial, the family receiving visitors at the residence, 6353 Fairhaven Road in Mayfield Heights, today until 8 p.m., Saturday evening, 6 to 8 p.m., and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m.